On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Naveed Asem. He is the head of data analytics and AI at WEX. We're going to be talking about experimenting with Gen AI. And obviously, experimentation is where everything starts. But really, what happens after that? How do you actually determine what to start focusing on, and what of that subset actually starts inching its way towards production and actually getting out into the general audience and people using it and change management? And as well, we're going to ask about what some of those thresholds and metrics are that Naveed has seen and used in this process. Super excited to have you on the show. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me here, Amir.
Absolutely. All right. What does WEX do before we start?
Yeah, at a high level, WEX is a fintech company. We also have a bank. We provide payment processing for a number of our customers in mobility, corporate payments, travel, and benefit space. Our offerings are either fleet management, fuel cards, AP automation, virtual cards for travel. Companies like travel agencies, airlines, hotels, they all use our payment rails and so on.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to be talking about the experimentation within Gen AI. And I guess when we first started talking about this topic, we were talking about this is not an easy journey for many companies, and there's a lot of unknowns, and those that are doing it potentially are picking low hanging fruit like a chat bot and as an experimentation point. That's a common use case. So maybe let's actually take a step back. I know we're going to talk about the experimentation, but maybe talk to us about your stakeholders, right? So in this conversation of looking for areas where generative AI can be applied, how do you work with your stakeholders to start helping them understand how a business need could be identified that could be a right fit?
I mean, that's a great question, and you should always start with the stakeholders first. So I'm glad that you're asking me that question. So the approach that I have taken with the AI journey has been we use this thing called 4Ps framework. Essentially, it stands for potential, platforms, people, and policies. So we said that we need to advance our AI capabilities. And the way we will do that is we will look at our stakeholders and the actual product needs or the customer needs in those four different areas, and we will advance them at the same time. So within like potential, we looked at across the company. We said, let's look at sales and marketing, customer success, risk, technology teams, product innovation teams, and actual customers. Understand what are the areas where they could use AI. And we basically looked at areas where we can generate revenue for WEX as a company, areas where we can provide better service to our customers so that we can increase their satisfaction, they could become our promoters, and also areas where we can automate a lot of mundane tasks, automate productivity for our people. So we looked at all of those like three areas across the whole potential for the company, for our products, and so on. So that was our main goal was let's start with the potential of AI. While focusing on that one, the first P, we also advanced the other three Ps. Platform, making sure we understand what tools that we want to use, understanding how does the data platform come into play, because AI can't do much unless you have a good steady state of data. So we wanted to focus on the platform. People was a bigger one for us because our stakeholder for AI, we said it is external customers and internal customers as well. So how do we elevate our people, their skill set? How do we educate them? How do we build a culture that inspires people to use AI so they're not scared and afraid of AI? They're embracing it, right? So that was the third P, and the fourth P was policies, which is as stakeholders, our chief legal officer and so on, making sure we're thinking about ethics, we're defining standards and putting governance in place. So that's kind of how we started our journey for our stakeholders.
I love that. That's a great walkthrough. And as you're working with stakeholders and you're getting lots of feedback, lots of ideas, you have to find a subset to work with. I guess when you're listening as a technologist, I know you want to capture the business requirement up front. You want to really understand the business impact. How do you start operating with that end in mind? Because you still know you need to go through, obviously, the application of technology. You need to focus on change management. Do you factor any of those as you're kind of listening to ideas and what experiments you might want to start actually working on?
Yeah, so I will tell you from my experience when we started our journey on AI in 2022 and 2023. It was almost like we opening the floodgates, right? So we start talking to people and say, hey, you know what? These are the areas you can use AI. And they say, you know what? I have this one problem. Come with me, sit with me, and tell me how is AI going to solve this problem for us? So we started capturing that. So it was almost like we are opening the floodgates of all of these ideas coming our way. So the first thing we had to do was have a framework where we're capturing those ideas. So internally, we use a tool called AHA, and in AHA, we created a space where we would capture the ideas that people are bringing in and capturing a lot of details around who is the person, what is their business need, understanding is it a idea that we can generate revenue for Wax? Is it an idea which will improve productivity? And is it an idea that will increase customer satisfaction? So those were the three areas that we were capturing for every idea. So we would start collect those ideas, and then weekly basis, my AI team will sit down and with our product managers, we will say, let's look at all of those ideas and plot them in a graph. And the graph that we were using was it went from left to right in the form of easy to difficult to implement. If it's a easy to implement, it goes on the left side. If it's hard to implement, it goes to the right side. And then it went from low to high impact. By doing this project, are we going to have a huge impact on our revenue, for example? Then it goes up on the top quadrant. If it's low impact, goes below it. The same thing, if it's a cost saving project and the impact on the cost is high, then it goes up on that impact layer as well. So by plotting all of that, the easy to hard, low impact to high impact, we were able to see a pattern. And the pattern was that the areas, the projects that were high impact and low complexity, those were easy to do for us. And we said these are low hanging fruit. So we started prioritizing those and we started doing discovery on it. And our discovery was basically four things we looked at: the value of doing this project, the actual business value to Wax and our customers. We looked at the viability of doing it, and that's kind of like the product manager. Can we do this thing? Will it work for our business, and so on? We looked at the feasibility. Can we actually get it done? Do we have the skill set? Do we have technology in place to do it? And the last one was the usability. If you were to do this, we don't want to just build products that don't jive together and throw it at our customers. We wanted to give them a superior user experience. So we looked at all of those four different quadrants, four different areas, and we started prioritizing different projects that came our way.
As you kind of start prioritizing, at what point of the process do you start thinking about thresholds, metrics, what you need to see to validate that the experiment has worked? And maybe if there are, before and after, what was the if you have an example hypothesis, that'd be great to kind of just understand some of that.
I'll take a few steps back. For us to work on those projects or products or do experiments, we basically started our journey. We started meeting with the board of directors and our ELT, and we asked them questions around, where do you see AI can provide value to X? And it went back to the area that I mentioned. Those are the three goals that we set, which was revenue, productivity, and customer experience. And working with our ELT, with our CEO, we identified goals for those. So we basically came up with achievable, tangible goals for each one of those areas. For example, productivity. We set a goal statement saying that by end of the year, we want all our people to be using, all the Vexers to be using AI and becoming more and more productive. And we came up with a number. It was between 10 to 15%, for example. And then we started tracking that. We said, this is our objective that we want to achieve. We have key results from it, and we want to start tracking that OKR. The same thing happened with the revenue. We said, we want to make sure AI is infused in every product that we offer to our customers. We want to become AI first company. And by doing that, we want to see a actual revenue impact by doing these projects and products that we do. And then the third one was customer experience. We wanted to see actual like PSAT scores, NPS scores, moving the direction where we can actually measure it. So to answer your question, we had to start with a broad thinking, like X wide. What are those goals for the whole company that we want to achieve? Now, for projects that we were picking to do, our main goal was we want to see, do these projects align to those company-wide objectives that the ELT has set? For example, if a virtual assistant is a project that we want to do, does that align with those three top goals that we set? If so, now let's look at the potential value of doing this work and complexity of doing it. So this way we understand for all the projects that we are taking on, how do they align with those top goals? And then we can start prioritize them and also do trade-offs. Maybe we want to work on virtual assistant now and other projects we work on them later because the value of doing virtual assistant is much better than the others. So that's how we pick the projects to do the trade-offs. The last topic I'll mention is that once we pick a project, then it goes through our product development lifecycle. So our product development lifecycle is basically three phases. It starts with discovery. We want to make sure we're building the right things, right? That is a discovery. We're researching, looking at prioritizing the features, and then we're looking at how do we validate our approach and de-risk us, and that's where experimentation comes in. The second part is after discovery is done, we do delivery. We've discovered we know what we want to do. We've done experiments to de-risk ourselves, and we have an idea of how we will solution it. Now let's build a plan to develop it and deliver it. And the last phase is optimize. Now that we've delivered it, we want to scale it out so we can keep doing more and more of it as a durable solution. So for us to, once we pick that project, we go through a discovery process, we do the experiments, we will realize at that time that some projects and products that we're building, perhaps by doing the experiments, we realize our hypothesis was wrong. Maybe we were thinking it's easy AI, generative AI kind of solution. But what you really want to do is out of the box, go use Einstein GPT to support virtual assistant, for example, versus building something ourselves. So experimentation helped us also prioritize and reduce the funnel of ideas into things we could actually achieve.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously you're picking a certain amount that you want to actually tackle, and you're looking to actually drill down and get a subset of that. I guess when you go from that transition from, hey, listen, we're testing 40 or 50 different ideas, things are working through development, we're getting the POC in the hands of people. I guess from that to getting to smaller subset and to go to actual production, what does that journey look like?
That is the hardest journey, especially with Gen AI. In your traditional product development, that journey is easy. When you're building a product, you're thinking about it, what you're doing. Are you going to innovate? Meaning, are you bringing something new to the world, right? And an example of cars would be, are you building flying cars, right? That's the innovation. Then the second one, which is lower than that, is introduce. Maybe it is something that you introduce a new brand of cars that you have. You're a car company, right? You're introducing something new within the same market you have. And then the third one is improve. Something you already have, you're just doing a new paint job, right? So there, I would categorize the products that you build in those three categories: innovate, introduce, and improve. In your traditional product development lifecycle, you start with discovery. The goal is to build an alpha, with a small set of group of customers internally mostly. Then you go to the beta, and then you go to production. With Gen AI, what we realized was that this cycle was very iterative. You would have to go through alpha, beta, production, and then repeat as well, mostly because AI landscape is changing so much, especially in Gen AI space. If you're building something today, most likely someone will come up with that same solution out of the box in a couple of months. And what you built is you may have to change it. So since the AI landscape is changing so rapidly, you also have to really accelerate how fast you go. And the cyclical nature of product development needs to be in place as well. One other thing I'll mention is that for us, we were really worried about hallucination. Because we are in the fintech space and we have a bank. So FDIC, I mean, we have a lot of regulatory burden that we have to go through. So if we're offering a service for our customers and we are giving them an advice and they're taking the advice, we want to make sure it's hallucination free. So we actually had to build a lot of like guardrails. We had to do a lot of reinforced learning and had to identify domain experts in-house that can train our own AI models or basically help us curate the data set the right way. So it was very hard for us to do that, but we had to get something in the hands of our domain experts very quickly. So the development of the actual AI product was fairly quick. We did it in matter of weeks. But the refinement, the iteration, hallucination free, the bias, building the governance model, that took us long time, months. And throughout that cycle, we kept reiterating, re-evaluating products we were using. For example, we started with a GPT 3.5. Across the journey, GPT 4.8 came out, and we said, you know what? It gives you multimodal model. We have 4.0 mini, so we can actually save a lot of money doing that. So we had to go to the drawing board and change a lot of our architecture that way as well. So summary would be getting something in the hands of a customer as quickly as possible, and the customer that you can trust in a safe environment, alpha environment, keeping in mind that technology is changing so fast, so you have to keep redrawing the architecture. Third one is making sure that you're de-risking your environment, asking what are those assumptions that you've made, hypotheses that you need to test out, and testing them all the time. So I think that has to be the right approach.
You mentioned governance. I guess at what point, and I know that governance within AI is becoming a big thing. It's not simple. There's multiple parts to it. When you start thinking about governance, where does that get introduced? How early in the process do you introduce that? Because obviously it's a whole different set of resources, but within this process of going from experimentation to refining down to a smaller subset to something even that's being considered production, when does governance get injected?
That's a great question too. I would say from my view of the governance is that you need an overarching policy for the whole company for AI. And that policy is basically proactive governance, that I would call it. For example, when we started our journey on AI, we said we wanted an AI acceptable use policy. And we rolled it out to everyone in the company. We said, you must go and read this policy that we established that tells you which tools to use, how to use them. Don't put, IP on the Gen AI tools, for example. Don't put customer data in it. So that proactive governance is something you have to establish, regardless of projects or products, right? So it's how do you use the tools. Beyond that, at product by product level, you have to establish governance and some of the controls. And your traditional data governance also expands in it. Your traditional governance is where's the data coming from? What does the data mean? The dictionary of data. So it's target mapping. You need to understand who created the data, who are the data stewards, the data owners, all of that stuff, right? That expands into the AI world as well, because AI is making decisions based on data. In a way, the stakes are higher because when you get a decision from AI, you don't know all the time what data used to make the decision. So you want to make sure that the pool of the lake that the AI is sitting and getting data from is clean. It's has all impurities out of it, right? So I would say the first step is the data governance. Your foundational, just expand that to AI. The second thing is around the governance of how are people using the AI. If someone is using AI to present something to the board or to report on the street, that should not be happening. So you need to really understand how your people are using or will be using AI tooling or products that you're building. And you have to put guardrails to make sure people don't use it for the wrong use case. Third one is the security of data within AI. If I am a customer and I'm using an AI tool and I say, hey, tell me when is my contract ending, you don't want, if AI needs to be looking at only my data, if it looks at my peers or my competitors' data and gives me the information, that's breach of information, right? So you have to put those guardrails around customer data as well. And the way you do that is in AI space using RAG models. So you're bringing the data set, vectorizing it, embeddings are like within that domain. So there are a lot of technical ways you can do that, but you need to enforce that governance in the software itself. And the last thing I'll mention is around the governance is around, when I think about governance, there are the standards that you can define, the process, and the policies. But one thing that people forget is the ethics and bias, right? You have to make sure that the data that you're feeding into the AI models, not only that it's correct and it's clean in your guardrails, but also it represents the population, right? If you're feeding the data that is completely highly biased, then the AI may work, but it's not working in a more ethical way. So you have to establish those ethical bias guardrails as part of the product development lifecycle as well.
Maybe one aspect of this that I also am very interested in is about change management, because obviously a lot of AI, Gen AI solutions are meant to help with automation of something, right? That's the goal. When you guys are looking at experiments, you're looking at, what could go in production. When does change management come into play? How soon do you start looking at the actual impact to the workflow, the person's role, whether it's a human in the loop type of situation or whatever it could be? When you start looking at that, how does that factor into things?
Yeah. So at Vex, I will say from all the companies I worked at, I feel like Vex does a really good job in change management. So a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, we started this. We kicked off a project where we established we call it Vex Next, which was like how do we advance Vex in a place where we're establishing these best practices in place. So we stood up a group of a team where all the projects that we are doing across the company, we are able to understand what those projects are. We managing them in a holistic way. And not only that, we are also looking at change management. So change management was a big component of that. So as part of a project intake, we are looking at, for this given project, what is the structure that we need to put in place. We look at the KPIs, we're going to report on what are the teams, the races, the timelines, the milestones. And as part of the process, we look at change management as well. We ask questions around when we productionalize the solution, what is the impact on people? How is their daily life changing? The ways of working changing. And not only that, we also look at how do we de-risk in areas where we may need to train people. At Vex, another thing that I'm really proud of that we did was we said for us to accept AI, we want 100% of all our director and above people to be trained in AI. We want them to understand what the AI is, and we curated that training. That was part of the change management. Because for us, we cannot just throw AI technology at people and say, go use it. We really need to do a little bit of hand holding, especially with the leaders, and say, this is AI, this is what you can do for you, it's going to change your process. We want you to accept that. And if at the leadership level, you're able to win people's hearts, that the knowledge you shared trickles down throughout the whole organization. And that's exactly what we saw as well. Our year over year, people adapting AI has been increasing for last 2 years. And I think the change management has become much easier for us because instead of us enforcing change, people are asking for the change. So to answer your question, very simply put, change management starts at the project intake. You decide. And especially when it comes to AI, almost every project needs to have change management part of it.
Well, I mean, I think that's, when we first spoke, you had mentioned obviously going through this journey. I said a lot of people are very early stage or trying to figure out these things. And maybe the final question is maybe around ROI. I'm always fascinated when it comes to AI and Gen AI. It seems that we are at an interesting point where companies, technologists are okay moving towards bleeding edge. Rarely see that. That's not the norm. But in this case, we're seeing that. We're seeing the anticipation of the impact. People are spending, investing, building centers of excellence, trying to understand competencies. When you look at ROI, how easily is that to identify? And I'm asking because I have not gotten very good answers, and I'm always just curious how people are, using Gen AI and establishing some type of return, especially when it starts going out to the broader company, which is even harder because costs are going to spike at that point.
Yeah. And calculating ROI for AI is really hard, especially because I think things have been changing so much as well. As I mentioned, in AI space, for example, if you were using GPT 3.5 and your cost of tokens was a certain level, and then you go to GPT 4.0 or mini, the cost significantly reduces, right? So I think the ROI is, again, one of those very dynamic things in AI, the projects that we do. The thing that worked for Bex was that to calculate ROI, we looked at many different things. Our first thing was, yes, technology is something we need to look at. We need to understand cost of running and building a platform using some of these third-party tools. But we also wanted to look at, and we made a lot of assumptions on this, was like people, their time, right? To look at the ROI, you have to look at this person is spending X number of time doing this task. Now with AI, they will be doing Y, right? So if they were spending 60 hours a month doing this one thing, now the 60 hours goes down to 10 hours with RPA, with AI agents and AI. So you can really figure out what the ROI would be. Hardest thing of that is tracking it. I think we can sit down in a room and come up with all these assumptions, but if you don't understand and track that time, it's really hard to understand the ROI as well. So I think with all of that being said, tracking ROI for AI is one of the hardest things to do. But to do it the right way, you really have to think beyond technology, beyond tokens, beyond software or Kubernetes clusters where your things are running. You really have to look at people's time and how you're changing it, how you're impacting it. And that really comes from the leadership, looking at the org structure, and also building some kind of COE environment where people are engaged with you so you can track these things down the road.
I mean, it's early days. I love it when, we have some, in the wild, real world application of this stuff, because obviously, I think a lot of people are trying to be prepared. I think that's what I've understood with a lot of Gen AI initiatives is I want to be ready so that if the time's right, we can accelerate and take advantage of it. But also a lot of new capabilities, and also companies that just don't have depth in technology development. Tackling this is really interesting. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing, because I think this is very useful for everyone to hear. Naveed, if somebody has a question that we might have not covered, or they want to follow up with something you mentioned on the show, what's a good way of touching base with you?
The best way would be LinkedIn. And I know you guys will publish my LinkedIn profile, but you can just look up my name, Naveed Asem, Naveed Asem. Surprisingly, there's only one Naveed Asem on LinkedIn that I could find. It shows up in the top research. So you can find me there. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Okay, brilliant. I will make sure we include that. Naveed, thanks for being on. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here. And again, thank you for the great questions you asked me.
Absolutely. All right. That's the end of the episode. We'll be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, experimenting with Gen AI. I think this is actually a fantastic episode where we got into nuts and bolts journey of somebody who's actually delivering solutions, talked about the process, talked about stakeholder involvement, talked about metrics and even ROI. So Governance, we actually got to that as well. I didn't know if we did, but we actually got a topic touched on governance. So please share this with somebody else who might be interested, who is actually going down this journey, who could benefit from listening to Naveed's experience and his journey. So please do that. Also, like the podcast, subscribe, comment, leave me a review wherever you're listening to this. I'd love to hear from you to see how to improve the show for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.